welcome back to the channel. More Pillage here from the Fall of Rome expansion. We're getting through the remaining factions that this new mini expansion presents to us, and of course we have to talk about the Visigoths, right? The Fall of Rome wouldn't be complete without these guys. So let's take a look at what they have going on. As far as rules go and new like gear talents, it's pretty simple actually compared to some of the other factions we just looked at. So they have the Visigothic banner, and so it follows the same rules as ordinary banners in the rulebook. However, they let you reroll all failed to hit rolls, not just results of one, which is very, very powerful, right? So well worth investing in a banner carrier for that ability, right? Obviously, it's still limited by range effect and everything like that, but the fact that you can just reroll all failed to hit rolls is incredibly powerful without any other restrictions or anything like that put on that. So if you're going to be fighting the Visigoths, or if you're playing the Visigoths, you're going to be spending the points to have that banner person because, yeah, why not? They also have a rule here, protect the loot. While a Visigothic figure with a loot marker, or in contact with a loot marker, is in contact with an enemy figure, it can re-roll all its failed defense rolls against melee attacks. So they're just, they're raiders, they're pillagers, pun intended, right? So the fact is, in scenarios where these loot markers are there, if you can just get some of your troops surrounding those markers, and if the enemy is going to try and take those from you, or even if you're, having to transport the loot and get away, you have essentially extra defense here. So combine that where if you're, let's say, close to the banner, and then also making away with the loot, and you kind of have like your forces maybe bunched up a little bit, you secure the loot, kind of protect them, get in the umbrella of the banner. So now you're re-rolling all failed to hit rolls if an enemy's coming after you, and you get to re-roll failed defense rolls. Yeah, I'll take a re-roll on offense and defense, please. So really powerful stuff there. They do get one talent. It's called Aryan Zealots, 30 gold for that. So when a Visigoth figure charges a non-Visigoth figure, so in other words, unless it's a mirror match, it can choose to reroll its charge roll if it doesn't like the result. Wow. So they get an offensive reroll, a defensive reroll in most scenarios, or a lot of the scenarios. And then, if we invest in this 30-point talent, which is, right in the middle there as far as costs go on those talents, we can, and again, by and large, unless we're playing the mirror match again, it's going to be a non-Visigothic figure. We can reroll our charge distances. So if we don't get what we want, we can basically get that second reroll. Again, if we already didn't make it the first time, rerolling it again would still be a fail. So, it is what it is, but it just gives us another chance to make those charge rolls as well. So really incredibly powerful stuff here. So 3 different sets of rerolls for the Visigoths. All right. With all that being said, let's take a look and see if the list itself is up to snuff. So, also, they get a weather bonus. They don't care about fog, so that's pretty powerful, especially when it comes to shooting and things like that, and just visibility. So, very powerful stuff here. All right, so obviously they have their warriors, the chieftain, no cataphracts. That just makes sense. They do get access to a healer for 10, and a supply wagon as well. So, unarmored, of course, is free. Paying the 10 for armor, 5 for the shields, so fairly typical stuff there. Some factions have the armor a little bit cheaper, and then the shields more expensive, or vice versa, or both cheap. I think if I recall correctly, Rome had everything pretty cheap there, but yeah, these guys are just paying a little bit more for armor, but again, well worth it considering the potential for rerolls on the defense there. Missile weapons, obviously improvised and stuff is free. Very cheap for spears, so probably expect to see a lot of those. They do get access to Hasta for 10, but hand weapons, I guess, is where they're going to have the major letdown here. 20 gold for hand weapons. That seems awfully high for that. So I wonder if they're going to have any like FAQs or anything, or just adjustments for some of these lists at some point. That really seems prohibitive for these guys. A hand weapon could be just about anything, so having a 20 gold tax on that seems, well, not that great. So certainly you're going to be, I think, leaning heavily towards the spears, right? That just makes sense. They don't get access to slings. They have the ability to get an angon, and they can get bows, no plumbadas, that makes sense. They also get horribly taxed on bows. You probably won't be bringing many bow-armed troops unless it's a very large game, just because that is horrendously costed. Again, obviously, yes, we see all the the advantages of the list, right, with the rerolls and stuff like that, but nonetheless, that's a pretty hefty tax. That being said, I could see a strategy where you invest in the banner and you clump a bunch of bow troops around the banner, and then you get to reroll your failed hit roll. So basically, you've made your bow troops into snipers almost, in the sense that like they should be hitting most of the time. So that could be a fun little tactic there. The horses, they get access to that, so fairly standard cost there. Also a warhorn, important that they can have that. No hounds. And I guess to balance out the sheer power of the banner, they are paying 60 gold for their bannerman. But again, probably not worth it in the small games, considering some of the other costs above here. But for those very large games, that's going to be absolutely a must take. Alrighty, so that wraps up the force and the look at the Visigoths, guys. Again, really powerful special rules and the talent, just all kinds of rerolls. And it's still a very functioning, workable list here, just with some curious costs as far as the gear goes, right? Again, you're really getting punished for taking hand weapons here with them. So, if you think a basic warrior here, right, 10 gold, let's make sure we get them an armor and a shield, right? Because we want to maybe be close to the banner to get those awesome rerolls with that kind of armor save. So we're at 25, and then now 45 for a guy with a hand weapon. That is that's too much. I mean, even with some of the rerolls, that just seems prohibitive. So you probably won't have too many of those. I'd say maybe give the chieftain the hand weapon for sure. And really, I mean, I guess you could just go like a lot of improvised weapons and hope for some rerolls if you're close to the banner. But yeah, that hand weapon is unfortunately so high costed there. So again, I think the bulk of the force will be spears, with just a couple of like elite hand weapon guys fully kitted out to take advantage of things there. The missile troops, again, yeah, you have access to the Angon, but even then, that's 15 points. I would say that strategy of maybe just no armor whatsoever, but just taking a guy with a bow and packing some of those around the banner man, and just plinking shots with rerolls for misses, and just forcing more casualties that way, I think it could be pretty nasty combo, actually. You can keep the banner guy back, surround him with his archers and everything, and then send some of the troops up to fight. And ideally, if you can have maybe the banner and the missile guys on a slight elevation, so you can rain over fire over your troops and hit the enemies, soften them up, and then that can help mitigate some of the other issues here. The horses, again, it's fairly typical stuff, but if you wanted a just normal armored guy here on a horse, right? So again, what is it? 10 for the warrior armor shield, so 25, 45 for a hand weapon, and then basically 70 points for just a basic dude on a horse with no other like really special rules is pretty rough. That being said, you could have like a very mobile force with cavalry. Maybe I think you can have the banner mounted, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check on that. But again, that's just so high cost, and again, every time you do fail a roll and lose a model, it's just going to hurt that much more. The Warhorn's still workable, right? That's good stuff there. I don't see like many cavalry troopers here unless you go super light on the armor and just give them a spear, just so you have some of that mobility. But I think a lot of it's really just going to be centered around abusing the special rules that you get in this list, with what we just talked about. So that being said, I of course could be wrong. Haven't had a chance to really test this yet. If anybody has played Visigoths, let us know your thoughts on the list and the way that you've built it. Eager to hear that. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe. We'll have more Pillage for you guys soon.